TwoCowsGaming fans, we are back with week 2 of our Raiders franchise. We got quite a bit to get into, so let's get after it. All right, TwoCowsGaming fans, we are back. It is week 2 of the Raiders season. We are rebuilding the Las Vegas Raiders. We won our first preseason game, which I am very happy about. We beat the Vikings 37-24. It didn't really go down to the wire. We had control of the game for most of the game. Our defense showed up and stopped them, so I'm happy about that. Now, what I did was after the game, and I probably shouldn't have done it, but I went in and I upgraded all the players. We didn't earn enough coaching points to upgrade our coaches, so we didn't touch that. So today, what I want to talk a little bit about are some of the key concepts of building the team, or the way that I build the team in franchise mode. Now, bear in mind, as I talked about in the last episode, I am a pure simulation guy. I just call the plays and let the Xbox AI simulate everything else. So it's just like watching a regular game, except that I'm living the fantasy of being the coach on the sidelines calling the plays. So with that, we're going to take a look at our roster, and we're going to go right in here to the NFL rosters tab, and we're going to start right with the quarterback. Now, to me, this is just the way that I approach the team and my experience of many years of playing Madden. But the most important stat that any quarterback can have is throwing power. Everything else that the quarterback gets is something that he can get in training through his, through the weekly training that the coaches run. And when you earn development points, that stuff gets upgraded automatically. But you only ever get a chance to earn one throwing power point from development points. That's it. So no matter how many times you choose strong-armed quarterback as your development trait, you only ever get one throwing power. So you want to choose a quarterback that has a throw power rating with the highest rating possible. So I'm looking at all these quarterbacks on my roster, and none of them fit the bill. For me, the minimum throwing power that I will ever have for a quarterback, or that I try to have with a quarterback, is in the 92 to 94 range, because that allows them to really throw it deep down the field and make some big plays. So key concept here with the quarterback is throwing power is the most important stat. Running backs, I keep it very simple. There's 3 different types of running backs. There's a receiving back, there's a power back, and there is a agile running back. Excuse me. So I like to run power run, or I run like a 2-headed monster. I've talked about this before in my live streams. I've talked about this before in some other commentary that I've made, a couple blogs that I've written. But when it comes to running back, I like to have at least one power running back and at least one elusive running back. Those 2 combos right there give you a 1-2 punch, so that it gives you that change of pace. A lot of people who watch football and know a lot about football, they know what I'm talking about. But in the running game, there's a power running game where you just beat up the defense. You beat that defense down so that when you go to pass, they don't have the energy to rush the quarterback. The other concept is change of pace. So once you get them tired, you bring in your faster little running back, and the defense isn't going to be able to run them down quite as easily. So change of pace. You keep them off their footing. They don't know what you're going to run at them next. So that's the 2-headed monster that I run. It's been recreated many, many times by professionals, way back starting with like the 49ers. They had Tom Rathman, and they had Ricky Waters. Sorry. But probably the most famous running back tandem to ever do this was with the Oakland Raiders, when they had Marcus Allen and they had Bo Jackson. That is the best 1-2 punch that I've ever seen play football, because you had You had like the finesse running back who was great out of the backfield catching passes in Marcus Allen. And then you had your power running back, which was Bo Jackson, who in my opinion is one of the best running backs to ever play the game. So that's the running concept that I go with. So if I were to say the most important stats that a running back can have are probably strength, break tackles, and then, of course, carrying, because you don't want a running back that's going to put it on the ground. So you want to have like a carry stat kind of in that 92 to 95 area if you can. Now, the good news is all those stats develop. You get them through development traits and using your development points. So running backs, I don't worry too much about. You get a good offensive line, you get a decent quarterback, the running back will take care of what the running back needs to take care of. Moving on to fullbacks, I like a little bit faster fullback, so I generally convert tight ends to running backs, because it's nice to have the fullback safety valve out in the flat where the quarterback can dump it off if all the wide receivers are covered. But again, I don't spend a lot of time on fullbacks. I try to have a speed of like 81 to 86 with an acceleration of like, I don't know, 82 to 92, somewhere in there. Because they got to get out in the flat. They got to be able to get on that second level and take out a blocker occasionally, or a linebacker. So like if you're running up the middle, it's important to have blocking skills. Now, most tight ends have some blocking skills. And the truth is, in Madden, the fullbacks don't get any love, because in real life, there aren't any true fullbacks anymore. Most of them are converted tight ends, because the fullback is used as a third tight end often in an offense, or even a fourth tight end, depending on what the alignment is. So don't be afraid to convert a tight end, or in some cases, if you have a very athletic guard or tackle, put them in at fullback. You'd be surprised at what that could do for your running game. So generally, again, speed in the 80s, acceleration in the 80s to 90s, pass block and run block are probably some of their more important stats, but don't get too bent out of shape over the fullback. Not a super critical position in Madden. Now, wide receivers, the strategy I use is very, very simple. When it comes to development, there's only 2 development traits that I work on: deep threat and also playmaker. Those 2 developments are the 2 most important for wide receivers. Why? Because deep threat allows you to increase their speed. So if you go over here and you look at this column, I don't have very fast wide receivers. The fastest wide receiver I have is right here, and that is Trey Tucker. He's a second-year player. Not what I'm looking for typically in a deep threat. I want that speed to be a little bit higher, but he'll get there. With spending points on playmaker and deep threat, he'll get there. But all of these other wide receivers I have are largely just role players. And I lump Devontae Adams with that. Yes, he's an elite wide receiver, whatever. But that's not what I look for. We're talking about John Madden football. We're not talking about real life. So you want to have that speed attribute and that acceleration attribute as high as you can get. And then with playmaker, the cool thing about that is that affects their catching traffic and their catching ability. So you want to make, and then of course, where is it? Like their deep route running. You want to have good deep route running stats. The whole point is to be able to stretch the field. You want to have the fastest players out on the field so you can make big plays, because that supports your philosophy of having a strong-armed quarterback. Because he can, if your quarterback can chuck it 60, 70 yards downfield, you got to have receivers that can go out and get it. So you want to have deep threats, and you want to have the playmaker attribute constantly. That's all that I spend my points on, and that allows me to stretch the field and run up the score, because the only way you're going to win the game is by scoring. So it's very important that you do that with your wide receivers. Tight ends, very similar to wide receivers. I do vertical threat. I don't waste time with blocking tight ends. I don't waste time for pass catching tight ends. I do vertical threat all the time. Now they don't get the speed attributes quite as often as wide receivers, so you want to draft or sign free agent tight ends that have good speed. The tight ends that I have on the roster right now, I'm very happy with their speed. The next important stat that they need to have is acceleration, because those are stats that cannot be earned through development points. They're just raw physical talent. So you want to look for that in your tight ends. The rest of these stats, all of these, well, except for maybe strength, all of these can be developed through development points. So again, I generally go with vertical threat tight ends because they just have a bigger impact on the game, especially when you're running a 5-receiver set. Because something that Madden did a few years ago was they eliminated having all wide receivers on the field when it's a 5-receiver set. I don't know if that's due to an NFL rule or if that's just the way it is, but you can't have 5 wide receivers in the game. There's sneaky ways around it. You can edit the position of your one of your wide receivers to be a tight end, but I wouldn't advise it because tight ends are very important in the blocking game, the run blocking game. So you want to get a couple of good vertical threat tight ends. The next section I want to talk about is the offensive line. Doesn't matter across the boards. There's only one stat that I really look at when I'm looking at the offensive line, and that is strength. That is the single most important stat that offensive linemen can have. Doesn't matter if they're agile, doesn't matter if they're power run, doesn't matter if they're a passing offensive lineman. The most important stat you can get is strength. And then I think the other one I would go with that's kind of important is speed, because they need to sometimes get out to that second level, block down on an outside linebacker or a middle linebacker, and that can be very hard to do if they don't have speed. So speed and strength. Now, what should you look for in strength? Well, I'll tell you this much. This guy's not going to make the team. Why? Because his strength is only an 83. Generally speaking, the lowest that I will go is right around 87. 86 if I like the size of the offensive lineman. I like big, tall, bulky offensive linemen. One, they just look cool on the field when you're playing Madden. And two, they just generally perform better in game over game in Madden. Again, I cannot stress this enough. We are strictly talking about a video game. We're not talking about real life. There's a whole other philosophy in developing offensive linemen in real life. But in Madden, the only stat you really need to concern yourself with is strength. And speed is kind of nice to pay attention to, but it's not critical. It's not mission critical to Madden. And then we'll move on to the defensive line. Same rule applies here. Speed is nice, but it's not mission critical. Strength is one of the most important stats you can get for a defensive lineman. Like this guy right here, he's not going to make the team. He's not even going to make the practice squad. His strength is abysmal. 67, he can't get off the block. Strength is all about getting off the block, and he's not going to be able to. I just have him there to fill a position, just to fill a role until the regular season starts. Maybe he'll develop, but the thing is strength is another one of those raw physical talents, kind of like wide receivers, kind of like tight ends, where their strength is their strength, and there's only a limited number of options for you to increase that number. And we'll get into a couple of those a little bit later. But when it comes to development points, you're not going to get strength from development points. It's just not the way the game is structured. If you do get one, awesome, but it's so rare. You're better off just getting an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman that has tremendous strength. Speed is important depending on how you want to build your defense. I like a fast defense. So on my outside edges, the defensive ends, Speed is maybe a little bit more important, but there's a whole other philosophy with that too, which I'll talk about when I get into linebackers. Defensive tackles. This, more important than any other position on the defensive line or the offensive line, strength is absolutely the most important stat. If they don't have an 88 to a 92, somewhere in there for strength, don't even bother wasting your time on them. Maybe if you're running a 4-3, you can get away with it. But I generally like defensive linemen with the strength in the 90-ish kind of area. This guy probably isn't going to make my team. And then the other thing I like to look at is how tall are they? Defensive tackles, I like my defensive tackles anywhere from 6'4" to 6'8" in height. Why? Because when they do jump up to pass, that does make a difference. They can get their hands up way up high, and they have a chance at batting down passes and obscuring the quarterback's view. So you want to keep that in mind. Also, they got to be bigger and stronger than the offensive linemen that they're going against. So that's what I look for in my defensive line is size, strength, and in the case of defensive ends, maybe a little bit of speed. The rest of it, they earn through development points, just like everybody else. But raw physical talent, they can't earn that. Okay, you've heard me say this many, many times before. When it comes to outside linebackers, speed is the absolute number one stat that they need to have. The reason I'm keeping Eichenberg is he's a rookie, and to cut him would be $320,000. I don't know how that would affect my cap for the offseason. His acceleration is nice. What I might do is kick him inside to be a middle linebacker. The other thing I like to look at with outside linebackers is how tall are they. Now, like this Ellerson Smith, I really like how tall he is. 6'7". That's amazing. But when you look at his speed, it's only 80. And that upsets me. Or not upsets me, but it concerns me. Because all the height in the world isn't going to help you if you don't have the speed. Now, his acceleration is really nice. It's at an 89. You also want to bear in mind change of direction. A lot of times, outside linebackers are going to be dropping into coverage on tight ends and also occasionally wide receivers. So you need to be able to change it. You need to be able to have a good change of direction. These are about average for an outside linebacker. Ideally, you want to get these up around 80. But speed kills, especially when you're blitzing. You want to get that blitz home. And then, of course, this probably goes without saying, but all of the positions that I'm talking about, you want to increase the awareness as high as you can. Again, that's achieved through development points. That's achieved through playing the games. But with linebackers, speed, acceleration, change of direction. Tackling is also important, but most of the time, linebackers have pretty decent tackling ratings, so you're not going to have to worry about it too much. Middle linebacker, I like speed and I like acceleration. Change of direction is critical, especially for the middle linebacker position because they're going left to right. So they'll start out in the center, and then they got to break right or they got to break left to cover the play and stretch out the play. So you want a higher change of direction than perhaps the outside linebackers. Awareness is very big too because they're going to help direct the flow of the play. You want to get that up as high as you possibly can. Again, awareness is something that is developed. You can learn it. You can earn it. Not a big deal. Tackling is very important for middle linebackers. You want to keep that stat up over 80 if you can. Divine Diablo is got a pretty good tackling rating, but I don't know that he's going to remain on the team. His overall rating is 74. He's 26 years old, and in another 2 years, he's going to be out of his prime, and he's not going to earn as many points or as much XP to develop. So he's kind of on the bubble. We'll just see how he develops this season and over the next 15 or 16 games, but he's kind of one of those players that I'm kind of scratching my head Outside linebacker, we've already spent some time on, but Robert Spillane, he's 28. His overall is 80. Great speed, great acceleration. Change of direction isn't too bad. Tackling is awesome, but he is 28, so his development rate is going to slow down. He's not going to get much more above 83 to 84. So you have to decide, am I going to invest money in this player anymore since he's not developing as fast as the other players on my team? And then you have two younger players, one's 24, one's 26. These guys are just role players. Probably not going to keep them on my team. We'll see. Cornerbacks, again, this is another position where speed kills. You want to have the slowest of your cornerbacks. You want to have around a 90 to 93 on speed. Speed is raw talent, raw physical talent, so you just don't develop it. It doesn't come with development points. Now, there are some things you can do from a coaching perspective that'll give you a little nudge, but you got to have speed, you got to have acceleration, and you got to have change of direction. Awareness is very important, and then you got to decide whether you want to do man or zone coverage. If you're going to go man coverage, you want to focus on the man coverage stat. That's a development trait. There's man, there's hybrid, and then there's run support. And then also if you're going man coverage, you kind of want to develop the press coverage stat. If you're going zone's pretty self-explanatory. You want to have your zone coverage as high as possible. The way that I run my defense, I don't worry about catching too much. Tackling on the back end is very important, especially if they're going against good running backs, like Josh Jacobs or any number of the other very good running backs in the league. Aaron Jones is another example. Ike Pacheco. On the back end, you want to have your defensive backs be able to tackle. I also like size. I like my cornerbacks a little bit taller, a little bit heavier, just so they can match up with those receivers. Some of the tall receivers like Christian Watson, Vincent Jackson back in the day, that kind of thing. Safeties, I treat them as like light linebackers. They got to be able to bring the lumber. They got to be able to put on the hits, and they're your last line of defense against big plays. So they need to have some speed. They need to have some awareness. Generally, they're playing zone coverage. It's not very often when a safety drops into man. Maybe if they're covering a tight end, they'll drop into man. Don't worry about press. Tackling, though, you want to have that tackling stat as high as possible. Keep an eye on that. Change of direction, not quite as vital because they're on the backside of the play. So the play is going to develop and then they're going to react. But it's good to have decent change of direction just in case, because by the time the wide receiver makes it to this level in the defense, they've got a full head of steam and they are generally close to their top speed. So the safety's got to react very quickly. And then I like to have them with a little bit of speed. I try to have them around 90, 92, somewhere in there. They don't have to set the world on fire with speed. They don't have to be your Flash or your A-Train, but they do need to have some speed to react to the wide receivers and the faster tight ends in the league. So I treat free safeties and strong safeties as interchangeable. I build them exactly the same way throughout the season. But remember, physical talents cannot be developed. That's just the way that Madden is structured. Yes, you'll get the occasional point for speed. Yes, you'll get the occasional point for strength. You'll get the occasional point for throwing power. But generally speaking, raw physical talent does not develop in this game. So you have to draft very carefully. My philosophy on defense is speed kills. I build the fastest defense I can, and then I might start a guy who's only an overall 68. But if he's an outside linebacker and he's got a speed of 87 or 88, I know he's going to make plays. So then it's just a matter of developing him based on the way I run my defense. And the rest of that stuff, the brain stuff, is developmentally created through the points that you earn. The last thing I want to talk about is the staff. Remember when I was talking about how you can affect some of the physical abilities of your players based on your staff? Well, this is where it comes in handy. We're going to take a look at the talent tree on Antonio Pierce, my head coach. There's 3 trees here for him. Now, not all head coaches have the same 3 trees. They all have different philosophies. But in this case, you have staff modifications, which affects what the talents cost for your coordinators. And also, if you fire a coordinator, you get a certain measure of points back depending on how you build your head coach. So like, for example, if you spend 2 points here, you can get 20% less you can get the talents for 20% less on a defensive coordinator. So what are you using? You're using franchise points. You earn those throughout the game. That's the green F on the right. So like this would cost franchise points of 10. Now I screwed up with Antonio Pierce right out of the gates. I picked the wrong thing with the points that I earned from last game. I wanted to increase the XP for my right and left guards, and instead I went with tight ends. So, and I don't know how to refund that. The only way I think you can do it is if you fire him and then bring him back, and I just don't feel like doing that. So, for better or worse, the receivers are going to get very good in this offense. And then on defense, the defensive tree, you can do lockdown machine, which increases the XP that your cornerbacks get. You can spend up to 3 points here. And they develop that way. So they're going to get additional percentage of XP as they play the games. And I'm going down the tree for middle linebackers, left and outside linebackers. This is all on the defensive side of the ball. Now, we're going to back up just a minute here. See how like the XP is affected by wide receivers and tight ends. And then down here, you can actually adjust your XP gained by centers. I'm going to probably go with quarterbacks for my other picks because I want to have a good quarterback sooner. But that's also if I'm able to draft or trade for a better quarterback. Now, scheme fit is very important in this game. You may remember looking at the roster as we were looking at players, and some of those players have a little purple jigsaw puzzle piece. Well, that's scheme. And if they have that piece as part of their traits, that means that they fit your scheme. They're going to get a little bonus on how they play during the game. The nice thing about this is on defense, if I spend this point for the head coach, my defensive players will all count as scheme fits. So they're all going to get a little bit of a bonus when they play. Moving over to offensive coordinator, there's a couple different philosophies here. There's outside running, secure the line, and receiver guru. Those are the three trees this offensive coordinator has. Now, I question some of the skills of these coaches and these coordinators. Like pound for pound, run block power for wide receivers. Do I really need that? Probably not. But going down the tree, you want ball carrier vision for halfbacks, or do you want to have stamina for halfbacks? It all depends on how you run your offense. Are you going to do a run-first offense or a pass-first offense? Now, I haven't decided how I'm going to develop things here. Just depends on how I want my halfbacks to develop. And I might not even keep this offensive coordinator going into the offseason. Which goes back to the head coach, where if you fire the different coordinators, you get a certain number of points back. But let's continue on the offensive coordinator. This is where you're going to develop your offensive line. You get to boost awareness. You can spend 3 points here. And going down the line, you have to decide whether you're going to focus on your guards or your tackles or your centers. And you have to decide, are they going to be agile or are they going to be more power? I like to run a power running game, so I'll probably go down the power tree. So you start out with guards, tackles, guards, and centers. And then it goes right down the line. And then down at the bottom, remember how I said physical talents can't be boosted or can't be developed? Well, you can affect that right here with your offensive coordinator. At the very bottom, you can spend 2 points for the Mauler feature, which gives the offensive line 2 points of strength. Very important for the pass blocking and the run blocking of offensive linemen. Receiver guru is, well, we want to develop good receivers. Now I'm choosing the tree that kind of makes them more for deep threat. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to spend all of our points on this tree on the right-hand side. Going to the defensive coordinator, you have to decide what you're gonna do with your defense. Are you going to develop your toughness of your defense? Are you going to go man, which is often like press coverage, man-to-man, man zone? Or are you going to go maybe a different route and go more of a zone coverage kind of scheme? I personally like press and man. That's just the type of defense I like to run, but it's high risk. I mean, if you're successful in running a press or a man-to-man scheme, you're gonna get big dividends. But if you don't execute it properly, you're gonna get burned. So it's just something to keep in mind. Now this stacked box, you have a choice. Do you want to have kind of tougher cornerbacks? You're going to have harder hitting defensive backs. Here's another one right here. Takeoff. Boost speed for outside linebackers by 1 for 1 point spent. By 2 for 2 points spent. Now, why is that important? Because you see how there's 2 different branches? You can only spend points in one or the other. You can't spend them in both. And so for me, if I play by my rule, which is speed kills, well, obviously I'm going to go for the takeoff. I want my outside linebackers to have their speed the highest it possibly can be. And this is 2 points that all of my outside linebackers get, not just the starters. And then down here at the very last branch of the tree, you have textbook takedown. This boosts tackling for linebacker, safeties, and cornerbacks. Everybody in that second and third tier, or second and third level of your defense. The first level is the offensive line. Second level is linebackers. Third level is defensive backs. The whole purpose of those levels is, if you think of it as like defensive fronts. The first line is your defensive line. You want to contain the running back, shut him down right at the line, contain the quarterback, keep him from making runs. The second tier, or the second level, is your linebackers. They've got to be able to contain the outside run. They got to be able to push the flow of the offense into the middle, into the teeth of your defense. If they get to the outside edge, you have the third tier, which is your cornerbacks and your safeties. Now, your cornerbacks and safeties are there to take the ball away and prevent wide receivers from hurting you. But if the play gets outside, it's anything goes. And you have to pray that your cornerbacks on the outside are good enough to shut down the wide receivers so that it doesn't get into that backside tier, which is almost like a 3.5 tier where your safeties are. You got to try and contain that. Otherwise, you're going to give up big plays, play after play after play after play. So you want to kind of develop that. Now, man secondary is kind of important for that, because you're going to develop either your safeties or your cornerbacks all throughout this tree. Me personally, I prefer to develop my cornerbacks. You have a good shutdown corner like a Jair Alexander. The defense or the offensive wide receivers are not going to make plays because their best wide receivers are generally on the outside. And then it goes from top to bottom. So your outside wide receivers, number 1 and number 2 are your two best wide receivers, and then you have 3 and 4, which are kind of the next tier down. They're like your slot and your role playing wide receivers. Well, those are a lot easier to cover with your nickel backs and your safeties than it is the outside corners. So you want to have these corners that can shut people down, so that way your linebackers and your safeties can kind of have free run in there, so that they're not so hard pressed to back up the cornerbacks. If the cornerbacks can shut things down on the corners, hence the name cornerbacks, then the safeties and the linebackers can do what they need to do. The whole concept is to funnel the play inside to where you have the bulk of your defense, where you have your defensive line, you have your linebackers, you have your safeties. That way you can keep them from breaking the big play. Now, the big play is going to happen every once in a while anyways, but you want to funnel that motion or that offensive action towards the center of the field. Out on the edge, you're on an island. If your cornerback gets burned, chances are your defense is going to get burned. Defensive line guru. Here you have to choose how you're going to develop. Now, I like an attacking defensive line. I like them going straight ahead. I like them going through the offensive line. So I'm going with the tree that allows them to get off of the line and get into the backfield. That's the whole purpose of my defense. And then you go down here, you have more of like the contain. Fritz Shurmur back in the day for the Green Bay Packers was, in my opinion, the best defensive coordinator ever to set foot on the field. He was a big believer in the bend but not break. So he didn't mind giving up the 6 or 7 yards. He didn't mind giving up the 8 or 9 yards. He even didn't mind giving up a couple of first downs. But the end of the day, they needed to push for 3 and outs. They needed to contain the offense and keep them from making big plays. So, you may hear when you watch coverage, chunk plays. The whole purpose of the bend but not break defense is to avoid chunk plays and just keep chipping away at them. I prefer a much more aggressive defense. I like getting sacks. I like shutting things down before they even get a chance to develop. So it just kind of reflects my play call personality. Over here on the end, you have player personnel. This is everything that's off the field. You're not going to get a lot of development trait kind of boosts here. This is all about team building. So trades, what am I going to get? How am I going to improve the quality of my trades? It just depends on what you value. Do you value your draft picks, or do you value making trades for other draft picks? What are you going to do with your X factor players when you can't afford to sign them? What can you do to get something out of them? Well, if you trade them, you're going to get a little bit better value for them than you normally would. Over here, you have offense recruitment. Maybe, just maybe, and this happens a lot with me for linebackers, it's hard to tell, looking at the combine stats, who's going to be the best linebacker for your team. Now, obviously, if they have like a 4.4 to 4.45 speed, I'm going to seriously look at them. But that's just not the case. A lot of times they're going to have like 4.6, 4.7, 4.8 speed. Well, you're not sure how that's going to translate on the field. I've seen it kind of all over the place. I don't have the math that EA uses to determine what that translates to in linebackers. So maybe I'm going to use my offense or defensive recruitment to get those players that I need. Maybe there's not an offensive lineman that fits my requirements of being big, being bulky, but having good strength. And that's something we'll get into when we get to the draft and we get to the combine. as we're scouting players, I'll talk about why it's important, what you need to look at as you're scouting your players. But, maybe those players just aren't available, because in Madden, there's a lot of curated lists, draft lists, where certain drafts are stronger than others. And you may not, even though you may need a linebacker, you may not get a linebacker in the draft. You may need an offensive lineman, but you're not going to get an offensive lineman in the draft. So here's where you develop how you're going to attract free agents to your team, and how to save money on signing big ticket free agents. That's what the player personnel tab is all about, is getting those costs down. Getting the best players for the lowest cost, but also when you're trading away players, getting the best value. So that's kind of why the player personnel tab is important. Now, me personally, it's generally the last tab I develop as I'm playing Madden, just because I like to draft and develop. A lot of people don't know what that means, but in real world application, draft and develop means is, you draft players, you develop them young, you get them to a point where you feel that they're good value, and then you either trade them or you sign them to a long-term, low-cost deal. You're not going to be able to sign everybody. That's just the reality of living in this salary cap era. So, you got to kind of spend some points here in the different tabs. Now, how do you earn franchise points? Well, you have to select game day goals. For me, I choose generally the same ones every time. For the head coach, win turnover battle. What does that mean? Well, winning the turnover battle means taking the ball away more frequently than giving the ball to the opponent. So you want to have more interceptions, more fumbles than the opponent has against you. If I do that, not only do I get 6 points, I am also going to get 6 bonus points. Or no, I'm sorry, I take that back. I misspoke. I'm just going to get 6 points for development. It's free points. Allowing under 200 yards in this game is almost impossible. No sacks allowed is very difficult. 450 offensive yards is very easy to achieve, but I can't guarantee it. I can't guarantee that that's going to be the case in every game that I play. 5 offensive touchdowns, yeah, I'd like to do that every game, but the reality is I have the Raiders right now, and they are not a top-flight offense. So it's a project. So I'm not going to guarantee that I can get 5+ offensive touchdowns. Win by 17 points? Maybe. But like, for example, the last game that I played, yeah, I put quite a few points on the board, but I only ended up winning by 11. And that's due to the innate flaws of this game. 15 first downs, no problem. That's why it's not as high a value. You only get 4 franchise points. But winning the turnover battle, if I could do that, that gets me 6 points. Easy. Offensive coordinator. I generally can guarantee I'll get 400 offensive yards. Doesn't matter what game, doesn't matter what team. My target is 200 yards passing and 200 yards on the ground. Very doable if you have the right players on your team. That gets me 8 points. So right there, 8 plus 6 is 14. That's an automatic development trait for either my head coach or one of my coordinators. Sometimes, if I get enough points, I can get 2 development traits for my staff. Now, I generally go with 24 points or less unless I know it's an absolute terrible team. Excuse me. But the reality is, even terrible teams, when you're playing them, seem to rise to the occasion in Madden, and that's kind of frustrating. So I rarely pick these higher tiers. Sometimes I'll go with 20 points or less. That gets me 4. But 14 and 10, as a coach mode player, I generally avoid those. It's just not realistic the way that I play the game. At least not with the players that I have on the roster right now. Once I get established, once I have some decent players on both sides of the ball, maybe I'll look at these 2. but not very often. Weekly game plan. What can I guarantee when I'm playing? I can guarantee I'll get at least 2 passing touchdowns. That's what I try to do every game. 200 yards rushing. Yeah, I could probably do that, but it's just not consistent enough. Allow 2 or less passing touchdowns. I never try for that one. It's not because I feel like I can't do it. I just feel like it's tougher to do when you're just coaching. Sacking the quarterback 5 times. Well, I feel like that should be a little bit higher reward. But as you can see, there's 2 tiers. So if I get maybe halfway there, 2.5 sacks, I'll at least get 3 points. But realistically, you can't guarantee you're going to get that many sacks in a game. The last game that I played with the Raiders, I think we got 7 or 8, which was really good. But you have to bear in mind, 3/4 of that game we were playing against backups. 350 team passing yards. I wish I could guarantee that. It doesn't always happen. Force 3+ turnovers. Maybe. But it's not realistic. And then 5 rushing touchdowns. That takes a lot of effort. Because you have to remember, the rushing game, the ground game, uses a lot of time. And I only play 10-minute quarters with an accelerated clock. So it's not really realistic for me to expect to get 5+ rushing touchdowns. And that's how you earn franchise points for your team. That's how you develop your coaches and you develop your team. So you want to earn as many of these as you can. But it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to do. The last thing I want to talk about is your finances. If you look up in the upper right corner, you'll see that my value is $296 million. That's because I chose the mogul feature when I was creating this franchise. You can choose to be a coach. You can choose to be a lifelong fan. You can choose to be a financial mogul. I like doing financial mogul mainly because it gives me a lot of extra money to play around with as far as stadium upgrades and also bonuses, salary bonuses. So we'll go down here to manage team. We're going to go to stadium. The Las Vegas Raiders have this beautiful brand new stadium, so I don't need to spend a ton of money right now upgrading the stadium because of the 6 different features here, and I'm going to hide my camera so you can actually see what I'm talking about. They're all $99. So why should I spend any money upgrading this stuff when I'm only going to get 1 point per tier? It's just not worth it. So we're going to leave that alone. But where I can make a difference, and I wish this would stop kicking you all the way out. This is such a dumb way to do things. Go back into manage team. We're going to go into finances. We're going to go to tickets. Now, the target that you want to get is good value or decent value. I prefer good value because, yes, I lose a little bit of money, but I get more people into the seats, and I get more money that way. And then we'll go back out here. We'll go to merchandise. I try to make sure these are all good value. We're going to adjust this one at the top because it's decent value. Because we want to sell as many of those as we can. Same here. We'll go with decent value. Or we're going to go with good value on these. Try to get it in that sweet spot where we're going to make more money. Yes, I'm losing $10 per jersey, but I'd rather get a lot more jerseys sold. Now, that kind of brings me to one thing that I would like to be able to change in this game. Go to the jerseys. I wish that in the marketing tab that I could change who I'm marketing. You have Max Crosby, one of the greatest or one of the best pass rushers in the game, and he's not even listed here. It's like, why is an offensive lineman listed? I don't want him listed as a jersey, but I can't do anything. Like if I go over here to the marketing tab, and I got to exit all the way out, which is a pain in the ass. Go to marketing, player marketing. Why can't I change these people? Why can't I change who I'm marketing? Why is he? Oh, I'm sorry, he's a tight end. Why is he there and not Max Crosby? Why is Jacorian Bennett there, but not Max Crosby? And I can't change him. It won't let me. And it's very frustrating. It seems like a silly little thing to a lot of people, but to me it's very important. I want to market my best players. I don't want to market people that are, role players. And that has nothing to do with real life Raiders. Strictly talking about Madden. So I think that is about it for this video. I just wanted to kind of go through my team building philosophy. I'm going to go ahead and play the next game. But when we come back to the next video, episode 3, we're going to actually do some team building stuff and show you how I'm going to spend my points for my players and for my coaches. So that way you kind of get an idea of how I spend my development points. Well, maybe it'd be a little bit shorter video, but I think it's an important video. But until then, I want to say thank you to everybody. If you like what you're seeing here, please hit that subscribe button and follow. And also, thank you, Bazinga Man, for subscribing to the channel. I really appreciate you. With that, be safe, be kind, and remember, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, you do matter and you are loved. Take it easy, everybody.